Hello, hello. Welcome to Minds on Mushrooms, where we're unveiling the magic behind psychedelics for mental health and addiction. I'm your host, Maggie Kirkwood. Today with me, we have Ahren Lynch-Potter, and kind of a funny story. We have a mutual friend who suggested basically we should talk because we have interesting stories to share with each other. Ahren, you're coming in from Southern
Van
California?
No, no, no,
Oh,
no.
where?
Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, but I'm
Wow.
originally from Australia.
Okay. Well, I think we can pin that accent. I appreciate it. I have a lot of friends and family back in Australia, so it's good to hear the accent, mate.
Oh, yeah.
Alrighty, so yeah, I think I can relate to you on a couple things. You seem like a man that wears many hats. So
Yes.
by day, you're in car industry with sales, correct?
Yes, yes, I am. Yeah.
And then you are also the host of the podcast, The Mental Dietitian, correct?
Yep, yep.
Well, and then beyond that, I think where we're going to connect the most would be you are a facilitator of psychedelics, or you work with mainly men in coaching and with psychedelics, or I
I
guess
don't
let's start there.
facilitate. I don't facilitate at
Oh,
all.
oh,
I
okay.
don't yeah, I don't serve medicine at all. No,
Okay.
I integration and preparation coach for people who are going through psychedelics,
Gotcha.
and any person who's going through any kind of event, whether it's death, divorce, a new baby, a new job, leaving a business. I've had clients that had Fortune 500 companies fall apart. I've had clients that have run national level sports teams, all kinds of interesting clients that somehow at the start of my coaching journey came into my somehow were given to me. I don't know how. I seem to end up coaching men that are successful in some areas of their life and hyper successful. Maybe they've made millions and millions of dollars, or maybe they're hyper successful athletically,
Hmm.
but there's other areas of their life where they feel stuck. So I try to help men, especially who are stuck in some areas of their life and then hyper successful in other areas of their life. But I do work with women too. I do enjoy working with women. Women tend to be able to, I don't like making generalizations, but they tend
Sure.
to, as a generalization, be able to access their emotions a little bit easier. But there's always exceptions to that. I've met people, men or women, that are incredibly shut off, and then the opposite. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So okay, let's talk more about your podcast, The Mental Dietitian. How did that kind of come together and when?
Well, I've had the Mental Dietitian podcast for about 100, and I think I just released 113 episodes.
Dang. Good for you.
So, yeah, it's that they're weekly episodes. There was a few times there over the past 6 months where I was late by about a week. Just personal stuff, just things going on, just being a human being on planet Earth.
Well,
Um, but
goodness
yeah, it
gracious.
started,
That's amazing. I mean,
yeah,
that's a lot of work. Good for you.
it is a lot of work, and sometimes I feel like, what the hell am I doing? Where's this going? Why am I doing this? It's not where I thought it should be, which is just there's no point shooting on yourself. Like, what's the point? It doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
But it started about obviously about 120 weeks ago, roughly. I
Hmm.
think it was the start of 2022 that I started it. And the premise behind the mental dietitian was to give people a better mental diet, talking to people about mental health and physical health, and talking to people about how better ways to make money or how to connect with themselves deeper. And the premise was to, yeah, give people a healthier mental diet, because most of the stuff that we consume mentally is just junk. A lot of us spend too much time on social media, me included. I like Instagram Reels sometimes, and I'll just get stuck there for 15, 20 minutes. And It's a multi-billion-dollar algorithm to show me exactly what I like, down
Right.
from cats to MMA news to psychedelic stuff to cool little animations about people's souls, all kinds of stuff, and I'm just there.
Mhm.
So that's not the best mental diet. So that was the premise of the show, is to give people that. And I've had coaches on there, I've had world level comedians, I've had ex UFC fighters, I've had all kinds of interesting people, people in the psychedelic space,
Mm.
all kinds of people, moms, dads, people that have tried to take their own lives and talked about it on the podcast, just really profound conversations.
Mhm.
And it started because I always wanted to have a podcast, but I kind of put it off for like a year until my friend Gabe sent me this podcast with a guy called Kevin Palmieri. And Kevin was on a podcast talking about what he did.
Mhm.
And I listened to this podcast and it just struck a chord in me. I was like, I got to talk to this guy. He was
Uh,
like, yeah, I was making a bunch of money in the corporate world like I was at the time.
mhm.
And it was like, it just wasn't it. I wanted something different. I wanted to like make an impact. And I was like, cool, I want to do what he just said. So I sent him a message on Instagram and he sent back a video reply. And
Oh,
I was
wow.
like, yeah, like it was cool. And that's how he does it with everybody. So if you ever find out his name, it's just Never Quit Kid on
Okay.
Instagram. If you message him, he has a thing where every time he'll always send a video reply every single time, which
Oh, okay.
is really
Encouraging.
rare. Well, it's just rare. Most people don't do that, right? So I
Yeah.
just saw the level of like care and professionalism, and yeah, it was just really cool. So we connected from there, hopped on a phone call, talked about what it would look like, and then I recorded my first show, and that was, yeah, start of 2022.
Alrighty. So, would you say, in terms of your coaching practice, was that something that's developed along with the podcast, or can you talk to us about how that kind of came together for you and when?
Yeah, so yes and no. I think everything that we do links to everything else. Sometimes it just takes us a while to figure out what the link is. And if we link everything together one day, that's what some people call their purpose.
Mm,
Like, oh, how can me being a real estate agent or having a real estate brokerage, how could it link to psychedelics? And then, like, in your instance, for my instance, like, how could me selling personal training and loving selling personal training? And then I went into high interest loan sales for personal loans. And then I was in network marketing for about 3 years, sat down with hundreds and hundreds of people one on one on different cultures, different races, all kinds of interesting people.
mhm.
Then I went into car sales. Then during my car sales journey, I started a podcast. And at that time, I got invited to my first like psychedelic ceremony.
Mm,
All of those things linked together to the point where about almost just under 2 years ago, after being going to many different ceremonies, many different men's weekends, diving really deep into myself, I saw the transformation in other people in the psychedelic space.
okay.
And there is a coaching company started by a wonderful woman, Deanne Adamson, and it's called Being True to You. And Being True to You is the premier psychedelic integration and preparation coaching certification. So
Right.
she is the woman that started this about 15 years ago. She is a licensed counselor. So she has like, to get her counseling certification, to do 3,200 hours of unpaid coaching, basically, or
Wow.
therapy
Yeah.
for people. That's what the kind of process is. So highly educated, highly qualified, and her journey started around helping people going through iboga ceremonies
Okay.
for addiction,
Yep.
and she helped a lot of people doing that. But what her biggest thing that was kind of throwing her off is she didn't have a framework for people who were therapists, counselors, psychotherapists, to help people that were going to have these massive transformational experiences with
Sure.
psychedelics. But then they would come back and sit in front of a therapist and it doesn't fit into the medical model. When
Right.
you go to university, when you do these, it doesn't fit into it. It's hard. And obviously there's some things that do fit into it. There's probably therapists and counselors out there that are deeply connected to themselves and have their own experiences with things and just try to figure it out.
Mhm.
But that started her journey of building this coaching company that teaches people how to take people through the preparation
Mhm.
of and a psychedelic journey and the integration of a psychedelic journey, which sometimes is years after the experience. Like I've had
Right.
clients, most of my clients that I started with, and how I met some of those, the banker, the general manager of a national level sports team, real estate agents, all kinds of people that I've connected to.
Mhm.
They were doing ketamine infusions.
Okay.
So that's how this woman, Deanne, had started this big company. And then 15 years later, she's connected with all these different places all around North America. And she's constantly expanding that. And yeah, I did the course about almost 2 years ago. I'm a certified addiction recovery and psycho spiritual integration coach. So that's a
Wow.
big mouthful,
That is.
but
Uh,
basically, I help people who are any kind of psychological, spiritual suffering, whether it's from depression, anxiety, lack of purpose, anything. Basically, do you feel stuck? Yes, I do. Cool. Well, let's talk. I will help you find the tools so you realize that you're not stuck.
got you.
Yeah.
Wow, that is, I appreciate that. I think that, um, I've begun mentoring and working with people and um, just really understanding it's such an individual thing to each individual. And of course, um, we can only help in the ways that we know how to help.
Yeah.
And yeah, that training is pretty full on. So say the name of it again.
Being true to you.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and I happened to be on your podcast. That was a fun time.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to talk to you. I guess I kind of wanted to ask when it comes to plant medicine with you, what was you had your first ceremony, I guess, a couple years ago. Can you talk to us about if you had any calling to do that or what led you there? And if you could talk about the ceremony at all, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I first tried a psychedelic when I was about 18, 19. So
Mm,
it was psilocybin mushrooms, and I I think I was just 18 or 19, yeah. So I just this girl that I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with, and I loved her so much. The relationship had just ended, and I was like,
okay.
"Oh my God, this is the worst thing ever."
And you were 18, correct?
Yeah, it's just it's the end. It's the end of all things.
Yes.
Could there be more pain than this? No, I don't think so. But yes, there is.
Ah,
Life gets a lot more crazy than that. But I did mushrooms for the first time probably a couple of weeks after that. I had a jujitsu tournament the next day, and I was doing jujitsu at the time.
mm,
And I remember just we were me and all my friends were sort of sitting in a house, and I had a healing experience where I was like crying. I was lying there. I remember we were listening to Coldplay, and some of those Coldplay
hmm,
songs are really deeply emotional. And I was just lying there crying, and I felt lighter the next day. And then we drove up to this place called Perth in Western Australia from a little town I grew up in called Albany. And I just felt lighter. I wasn't as scared as I was about going to this jujitsu competition. I felt there was a weight off my back. And
mm,
I got silver. I lost to my one of my good friends, Jeff, in the final. And I just that experience, I was like, oh, there's something here. I had no idea.
yeah,
But after many times, I've done mushrooms hundreds and hundreds of times, so many
mhm,
different times. Just I always liked how connected I felt to myself, to nature.
mhm.
I used to do I wouldn't call them microdoses. There was a time there where I basically abused mushrooms, probably about a year before I did my first actual ceremony, where
Okay.
I was going to work in this basically vertical chicken coop, I call them. Those big high-rise offices downtown that have layers and layers and layers of cubicles and floor space, and
Sure.
it's just like a vertical chicken coop. That's what it felt like. And I was drinking as much coffee as I could. I was selling loans that were basically financial heroin for people, where you have people calling you that I need to pay my rent, my dog's gonna die, my
Mm.
ex-husband's trying to murder me, I need money.
Wow.
Just just really dark kind of energy. And making money from that, I was in a place where I basically did what I did to needed to survive, right? I
Yeah.
was really broke. I saw that you could make like 8 to 15 grand a month doing that, and I was like, I'm gonna go all in on that, because growing up I thought money was safety. I used to say this all the time. I said money's like oxygen. If you don't have
Mm.
any, it's all you think about.
Right. Well, I feel
It
like
is
that's something
true.
that's kind of programmed in some ways into our
It's
heads.
true in a way, yes, it
Yeah.
is programmed, but I legitimately, my body would respond to that. So if
Oh.
I didn't have any money, it would literally, I couldn't breathe properly, high amounts of anxiety.
Mm.
And no matter how much money I made, it felt like I was on this treadmill running as fast as I could towards this light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not getting any closer. I would just, maybe if I do more, maybe more's the answer. The
Oh,
old,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I ended up doing that for a while. I playing around with psychedelics, mostly mushrooms that entire time. I'd never really done anything else.
Mhm.
And then it was May 2021 was the very first time that I went to a men's weekend. I got invited by my good friend Marcus,
Mhm.
and he was like, "Man, like I think you should come." I was like, "Cool, I'm down." Psychedelics, hanging out with a bunch of dudes talking about stuff. I'm down. Let's go. And um, the very first psychedelic medicine that I used in that way was LSD.
Okay.
And I had a profound experience where I was like, oh, I get why this changed culture. I
Mm.
totally get it. I totally understand why in the 60s. I get why. I think it was Richard Nixon or Ronald Reagan. I think it was Nixon, that the war on drugs.
Nixon, yeah.
Yeah, because here's the thing: you can control a bunch of people if they believe that they are powerless and if they are divided. You cannot control people if they start being like, hey, these structures that are all around us, these social
Mm.
structures, they're kind of dumb. They're kind of
Right.
silly. But
Mhm.
that, if you go too far down that rabbit hole too, that's how cults start as well. You're like, maybe we can do it better.
Sure.
Let's all leave society and we'll figure out how to do it better. And then one person stuff comes out, and all of a sudden you got this like crazy cult where it's wild and shit goes sideways.
True
But
story.
yeah, but I just had this profound experience where it's hard to put into words.
So
Words
so you were at this first ceremony, you were having, LSD or
yeah.
mush oh, okay. So so
It was
you're
MDMA the first day and then LSD the second day.
oh, gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
So hard to put into words as always, but just a very profound, like, feeling of understanding kind of how the medicine works to help I'm stealing your words.
Go for it. But yeah, it just I saw things. I saw my subconscious programming, and I was like,
Mm.
"Oh, like." And I saw other people had deep somatic releases, and I thought that I remember seeing that for the first time, and I was like, "That's weird. I don't know if I could do that." And it wasn't till 2 experiences later where I actually released energy and released emotion from my body for the first time somatically. And
Mm,
when I did that 2 journeys later, because I went in May, then I
mhm,
went in November, and I got invited to a smaller one in February 2022.
okay.
And that was mushrooms, I remember. And I had this really bad pain in my scapula. like really bad. Nothing I could do was I would tried acupuncture, I tried massage therapy. I would have a lacrosse ball in there, like a massage ball, constantly working it out for months.
Yeah.
And then I took the medicine, was lying there, and I started to communicate. And it says, "You're not gonna poke and prod this.
Mm.
Like you need to do it differently." I was okay, and I basically released this. It was stored in my nervous system.
Okay.
I released it from my scapula and the pain was gone from my scapula next day. And there was a lot of stuff about carrying other people's stuff and being trying to save everybody.
Mm.
And maybe if I work harder, I could save my mom and dad. Or maybe if I do this, it
Mhm.
was a lot. And it basically felt like I wrote this down. It felt like I had a spiritual tooth pulled out of my scapula.
Oh,
It was
wow.
very interesting. It
That's
was like sore the next day, but whatever was stuck in there was gone.
so let's talk about when that was happening. Were you like, was it a feeling of energy, release? Was it how, at what point did you know that's gone? Was it all mental or did you feel any
No, it's
physical?
somatic, so it's in your body. So mind, body, spirit, right?
Mhm.
A lot of people intellectualize their emotions.
Mhm.
I've had so many clients that think emotions are thoughts. They are not. They get stored in your nervous system. I've learned a lot from just a plant medicine experiences, and the best way I can explain it is imagine this is your nervous system.
Mhm.
That's your nervous system, and it's overlaid in your body. Your soul is overlaid on top of it. Your
Mm.
soul communicates to you through your nervous system because your soul can't speak to you because your mind, that's what your mind is for.
Sure.
So, my soul's expansion and my soul's journey is tied to releasing the knots that are stuck within my nervous system. And you have knots that are stuck in your nervous system from previous pain where your nervous system could not handle what was being happening to it at the time, whether it was war, rape, violence, that's acute trauma. And then you have more nuanced trauma, which is feeling like your parents always compared you to your brother,
Mm.
or feeling like that the teacher was always picking on you.
Mhm.
It's not harsh, sharp stuff. It's kind of more nuanced and might
Yeah.
happen over years and years and years and decades and things like that,
Mhm.
which always causes some feeling of inadequacy. I call
Mm.
it not enough itis.
Okay, I love that.
It's the real pandemic. It's the psychological, spiritual pandemic of the world. It's what all marketing is predicated on. Maggie, if you had this car, then you'll be
Mm.
enough.
Mm.
If you live in Costa Rica running a coaching thing on the beach and you serve ayahuasca to everybody, that's what you're looking for. And if
Mm.
you're not doing that, then you're not enough. And it's like, oh, fuck.
Mm.
So that stuff gets stored in your body.
Mhm.
So when I was going through this experience, I was it's hard to explain. It might look like an exorcism to some people. Other people, it was like it felt like there was energy bouncing off the inside of my body, and I was like, okay. And the only thing,
Mm.
my job was just to breathe. So every time
Mhm.
I work with a client, they have some kind of plant medicine experience coming up. I'm like, if you ever get scared, if there's anything that's just too intense, just remember my breath is my home. That's
Mm.
all you have sometimes when you're in those spaces, and your
True.
breath will show you the way.
Yep.
So I would breathe and I would expand, and it basically just looked like me vomiting energy, white foam, um,
I don't mean
and
to laugh. I'm just imagining.
yeah, it was,
Well,
uh, it was a lot. It was amazing. I Every time I would have this release, it would, like, bounce up my throat. I
mm,
understood what the chakra system meant for the first time. I was like, "Oh, okay," because
mm,
that's where energy seemed to get stored.
okay.
It seemed like the chakra system was, like, little emotional bladders stored up and down my spine that
Mhm.
had all kinds of stuff in them and would release and then connect to the other one and then come out my mouth.
Wow.
Yeah.
Full body. That's amazing. I
It
mean,
wasn't full body at that time because I didn't have access to the lower at all. I
oh,
still
you were
had pain
just
in my back,
okay.
but It was all through I opened up my kind of heart chakra, that's what it felt like.
Mhm.
It connected to my throat, and it would, like yeah, it would look like tensing muscles, and it, like, didn't want to leave, and it's like my face would contort in different directions, I'm like and I couldn't control it.
Mm.
It would make crazy sounds, like, strange sounds.
Wow.
So yeah, like if you was dead sober looking at somebody like that, you're like, that person is having an exorcism. I'm like, no, that person's getting well and releasing stuff stored in their nervous system, and it feels
Yeah,
amazing. But I had to see other people do that many times before I allowed myself to feel comfortable to even get myself there
sure.
because it
Well,
gave me permission.
yeah, I appreciate that as well. I think that a common theme or message is, it definitely takes some balls to be ready to take on a challenging healing journey. But again, I just love hearing about your experience. And although, yeah, it probably looks crazy as all shit, and to the normal or whoever somebody might not say sign me up for that, but I just thank you for sharing your story, because I think it helps to it's a lot of work and a lot to go through, but the end result, I mean, it's one of the most profound experiences of your lifetime, correct?
Oh yeah, you just feel so much better afterwards. You're like, I
Mm.
didn't know I was carrying that.
Right, right, right.
I had no idea. And if you look at it as a physics standpoint, there's we're energy, right? That's all it is we're releasing energy. That's what it is.
Hmm.
You have an energetic body and you have a physical body. And your energetic body, I believe, is tied to your nervous system, and that is tied to your soul. And if you run it through like a Jungian lens, Carl Jung called your
Mm.
soul, he called it a spiritual organ or a psychological organ.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how I see it is this organ that if you don't look after it, if you don't spend time with it, if you don't connect to yourself, you can either consciously choose to look at your unconscious. You can be like, you know what? I don't know what's there. I just know that there's things that I feel when I'm living in this world, and there's things that happen that is a sign of it, and I can just feel it.
Mm.
Or it will come out in neuroses. So you'll just be living your life, and all of a sudden you'll get emotionally hijacked, and you'll say things to yourself. You're like, that didn't feel like me, or that was out of character. I don't know who that was. It's like, well, that was your unconscious. That was your soul taking the steering wheel of your consciousness because you're not choosing. So choose your hard,
Mm.
pick your hard. You can consciously choose to do the work, or you can
Mhm.
unconsciously get emotionally hijacked throughout your life, and your stuff will come out just like a pot of boiling water if you're forcing the lid to stay on.
Yeah. Um, Something interesting. Some of the people, a few of the men I have been working with have told me that through microdosing, they are noticing this sense of kind of standing their ground or speaking up when they typically wouldn't. And I was discussing with one, he was explaining like it's this new sense of just not being rude or mean, but essentially speaking from his soul, this is what I stand for. I won't tolerate this and shut the F up. Or
Yeah,
so I want, yeah. Do you have any, does that correlate? Like, I,
100%.
yeah.
I call it, it's a principle that I teach people when I teach them how to sell correctly. So I also teach people how to sell. I've coached people around that too, but selling from a soul-centered place.
Yes.
I have
Yes.
a
Yes.
course called Soul-Centered Selling that present to the Being True to You community at the moment, and it's only accessible to them.
Hmm.
Maybe one day it'll be accessible to anybody, and I'll actually have a course where people can join it and things like that.
Ooh.
But right now, I'm just in very early stages of presenting it and seeing what works and what doesn't work. But
Gotcha.
going back to what you said, The principle is called "Be kind, not nice." So
Okay.
being kind is rooted in I care about myself and I love myself, and these boundaries that I'm going to put up with you are the best way for me to love you and to also love me.
Mhm.
If people, any person, and this might trigger some people that identify with being a nice person. I have never met somebody that's overly nice all the time that isn't rooted in absolute crippling fear.
Oh, okay.
Why? If you need to be nice all the time,
Mhm.
then you're not actually being a human being. Like the full range of what a human being is, because some people are assholes. And sometimes I'm not going to be nice to an asshole.
Right.
The reason I can talk about this is I spent most of my life being nice.
So
And
I
being
hear
nice
you. Yeah.
is I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. You can't make anybody do anything.
Mm,
Every person's emotions, feelings, thoughts are their own responsibility. So for you to take on the responsibility of like, well, I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable.
mhm.
Yes, the caveat to this is if you're going around screaming in people's faces, then yes, you will make them uncomfortable because you're being a psychopath. But if you're
Yeah.
just living your life and like you said, these men that are doing microdoses, they're getting probably access to themselves and they're probably coming from a more centered place and
Mhm.
their unconscious programming that maybe they weren't allowed to speak up as kids, or maybe their parents taught them certain ways of things, so they shrink and they
Mm.
do not make themselves, they don't step into their power. And
Yep.
when they access these microdose states, they're like, actually, I don't want to do that. I
Mm.
actually don't want you to talk to me like that. And I actually don't like that. And I appreciate it if you wouldn't talk to me like that, because if you keep talking to me like that, there's going to be two things that happen. Either that I'm going to have to change the dynamic of the relationship, which I'm doing right now by saying what I'm saying, or I'm going to have to step away from this dynamic and I'm not going to participate in it anymore.
Yeah.
That's being kind.
Mhm.
Because if somebody is exhibiting unhealthy or immature behavior, then you're like, hey, that's actually not mine. There you go.
Right.
Not mine. I don't want to participate it. That's being kind.
Yeah.
Being
I
kind
love that.
sometimes is firing somebody.
Mm. Mhm.
Being kind sometimes is telling somebody, hey, man, I don't like the way that you're treating people, and I'm not going to be friends with you anymore. But being nice would just be putting up with it. And if you're being nice, then you actually don't care about the other person as much as you think you do. What you care about more is not feeling uncomfortable in case that person reacted in a way that caused your nervous system to
Mhm.
produce an uncomfortable feeling. So to avoid the feeling of your own nervous system producing what you are avoiding within yourself, you'll just be nice.
Yeah.
You'll just be nice to everybody.
Well, thank you for spelling that out. It's funny. We here in Minnesota, we are known as Minnesota nice or ice. As some people say, apparently we are not as warm as we pretend we are.
Because
There
it's
is,
not real. It's not real. You're not being true to you.
I do have a buddy. He's putting together essentially a campaign to turn it to Minnesota kind. Speaking
Very
on
cool.
what you're essentially just said,
Yeah.
and taking that action to meet the other person, or it's more than just this facade. Uh,
That's awesome. Oh, great. It's like,
yeah, yes.
yeah, I've met people like that, and I'm just like, hey, you don't have to do that.
Um, I wanted to, if you're down for it, I know we both have sat with Wachuma San Pedro.
Mhm.
Um, would you be open to talking about your experience?
Yeah, yeah. What do you wanna know?
Well, I thought I had heard that yours it was co-ed or maybe partners were attending. If you're open to talk about any of that, and yeah, I just want to hear. we were talking about your somatic releases with psilocybin. Did any of that happen with you in San Pedro? I just like
Yep.
to hear. I've sat with it twice, and probably it's up there with psilocybin as my most favorite plant medicines. So yeah, I'd like to hear
Yep.
your experience.
Well, it was about 2 weeks ago now, and yeah, it was 2 weeks ago to the day, and I'd never sat with that medicine before. I was excited slash nervous, just like how you always are. Every time you step into that space, you know that you are going to feel. Because that's what all these things are. Like, what is healing? Healing is feeling. You go from feeling this much to hopefully feeling this much. And the valve opens both ways. My friend Marcus says this. He's like, you can't open the valve to pleasure unless you open the valve the other way to pain.
Mm.
That's all this is. When people make it so complicated, it's feeling. What you are doing is you are opening your capacity to feel more. And it's not about, oh, I just want to open my heart and feel all the love and the stuff in the universe. Like, well, you also have to feel all the opposite in the universe too, because it opens both directions.
Mhm.
So every plant medicine experience before 2 weeks ago for me, I used to have this sinking feeling that, oh, I'm waiting for the ball to drop. Oh, what's it going to be this time? Am I going to find out I was like sexually abused and I repressed the emotion? Am I going to find out that like there was some horrible thing that happened to me that I don't know about?
So
And I
you
always would go
you
into that space with
oh,
that energy.
wow. Every ceremony before this one?
Yeah,
Wow, okay.
because I and a lot of people do this. I meet them all throughout this space. Like they say things like this. And there's no judgment on my end. I just see it for what it is in some people. They're like, oh, I've been on my healing journey for 10 years now.
Mm.
I've been on my healing journey for 7 years now. I've done ayahuasca 100 times. I've done psilocybin 400 times. And I'm like, are you healed yet? Or are you just like healing? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Do you, like, are you just,
Are you addicted to healing? I
yeah,
mean,
are you addicted to healing? Like, what, have you found what you're looking for yet? Or maybe I'll find it next time. It's
right.
like, it is the snake eating its own tail. It's
Mm,
actually not enough itis
mm,
projected onto plant medicines.
mm.
You are seeking something outside
Yeah.
of yourself
Uh-huh.
to tell you something about yourself.
Yeah.
Projected onto the mushrooms. Maybe the mushrooms will tell me how to live my life. Maybe the
Mm.
ayahuasca will tell me how to live my life. So I need to keep going back
Yeah.
so that I can be told of why I'm so lost and why I'm so stuck.
Mhm.
It's like, do you not see that you are a snake eating its own tail? The very energy, the very seeking behind that is the problem. What if you just stopped seeking? What if
Yeah. Well,
what you were looking for the entire time was you?
mhm.
That was my journey, and I can't speak to anybody else's journey.
Okay.
And that was my journey
Mm.
until August, sorry, July 2023, where I sat with ayahuasca for the first time. And ayahuasca compared to Wachuma, for example, is Wachuma, my ceremony was beautiful. And it was all about gratitude and it was all about, hey, you're amazing. Look at everything you've done. All these of course moments where I was like, oh, of course I'm here. Of course life. Of course that
Mm.
happened. Of course I love that movie. Of course this happened. Of course I'm doing this. Basically a true embodied somatic experience of life happens for you, not to you. No matter what happens in your life, it all happened for you, not to you.
Mhm.
Wachuma gives you a choice. It's like, hey, here's some stuff that you can work on, and maybe we'll gently work on it. And if you don't want to work on it today, then you don't have to. But just know it's there. And Wachuma for me is instead of thinking about what you are feeling, you'll just feel like you'll just start crying, or you'll just start laughing, or I'll just
Mm.
start vomiting energy. And I don't know where it's coming from. I don't even ask. I just feel it
Mhm.
because a lot of people negotiate with their emotions. They're like, hey, this hard thing that I can feel my body is doing, maybe I'm shaking. If you tell me what it is first, then I'll tell you if I want to feel it or not.
Mm,
And the emotion's like sitting there, stored in your amygdala, blasted through your nervous system. There's no language center there. That's why we can talk and other animals cannot, because we have a prefrontal cortex.
mhm,
And your prefrontal cortex, which is your thinking mind, is negotiating with this ancient system, which is your amygdala, which can't talk to you. It's just emotion. So you
mm,
start negotiating with it. You start being like, hey, this this feeling that I feel in my body that I'm avoiding, if you just tell me what it is, then I'll let you know if I want to feel it. Doesn't work like that. For me, Wachuma was a deep understanding that my body has a deep intelligence. And if I just let it do what it wants to do, it wants to heal itself. It's
mm.
the mind that stops the body from healing itself. It will be like, I don't want to do that. It will start thinking and start zipping and zapping around, trying to do something else to avoid the body doing what it wants to do.
Yeah,
And what Shuma, you have a choice.
okay.
Ayahuasca, you
There's
don't have a choice. That you
yeah.
made the choice by attending. You made the choice by drinking it. And it's like, I'll drag you kicking and screaming, but oh, you don't want to do this anymore? Too bad. You're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And you can either surrender or I'm just going to make this really unpleasant. It's a very strict teacher. Beautiful teacher,
Yes,
but very strict.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find I mean, both times I've sat with Wachuma, for me, it's so gentle and loving and uplifting, and I do kind of feel like there's that on-off switch where, if you go inward and you're meditating, your experience is profound and there. And then the moment, at least that I start socializing, or there's a lot of value to go inward and sit solo with Wachuma. And I think with any plant medicine, but
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Or for me, it was kind of like just a gentle thing where you're in or out. That's the best
Yeah,
way I
it
can
comes
describe
in
it.
waves though. It comes in
Yeah,
waves.
yeah, yeah.
So you'll just be sitting there, you'll be like, oh, I think it's worn off. And then all of a sudden it's like, LSD is the same thing. I see
Ugh,
LSD is a lot more. I see it as like this snake's got a hold of you, and it'll like go out of this deep dark water, and you'll see sunshine and rainbows, and it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And then just as quickly as you came out of the water, the snake will plunge you down into this deep darkness, and you're like, oh my god, this is really heavy. And then all of a sudden you're coming out again, like a roller coaster.
oh, wow.
That's what LSD was like for me.
Mm,
And I heard somebody say this once, and it really resonated to me, is that there's technologies and there's spirits when it comes to psychedelics.
okay.
Spirits are tied to anything that is plant-based. So Wachuma has a spirit. They
Mhm,
call it, a lot of people call it grandfather, and they
mhm.
call ayahuasca grandmother. Um, they also, some people have called Wachuma uh, what's it called? Why can't I think of the bird? A hummingbird.
Oh, okay.
Because Wachuma
Oh.
is very like this. If you've
Mhm,
ever done it, it's very like you kind of want to dance, you kind of want to shake, and sometimes you just stand there and you start shaking like this, and it feels so good. And when yeah, I explored that, and the people that I've sat with plant medicine are deeply rooted to where it started. Like
mhm,
there's a story that in the Andes, before the conquistadors came, they had 1,000 years of peace because of Wachuma being involved in their communities and in their culture.
mhm,
No war for 1,000 years.
mm,
And if you've ever done Wachuma, you realize it's a very social medicine. You
mm.
could have a barbecue with it. You could have a social gathering on a summer day and have drink Wachuma. You could do that. And some
Yep.
people are like, "Oh, I couldn't imagine doing that." You could, if you'd cleared all the other stuff first. Like
Mhm.
I'm talking, you've probably done some work on yourself. You're not going to have this big traumatic event. Yeah, so there's lots of stories behind that, and yeah, it's a really beautiful plant medicine. It's probably my favorite. It's probably my favorite I've done so far because you'll have these deep somatic healing experiences,
Mhm.
but you don't your body will just do what it wants to do to heal itself, and your mind is kind of like, oh, I'm vomiting energy right now. Cool. And you'll just do it and you won't really know why. Your brain will just be like, what was that? It's like, doesn't matter. Doesn't
Ah,
matter. It was in there. It's not in there anymore. Just like any other thing.
mm.
It's a funny principle. Before you, I just want to teach people this, and it's so simple. And when I figured it out, not really figuring anything out. Anytime you try to hold anything in your body, whether it's urine or poo or vomit, you suffer, don't you?
Yeah.
Same with your emotions.
Mhm. That heard. Okay, real quick, you were saying your friend had taught you things you were saying spiritual or technology?
Oh yeah, so there's spirits that are tied to a plant. So mushrooms has its own spirit. Every
Okay.
time I sit with mushrooms, it's like catching up with an old friend.
Mhm,
I've spent so much time with mushrooms, but then each mushroom strain has its own different energy. Like,
mhm.
for example, penis envy is more strict than something like just like a golden teacher. It's more towards, I wouldn't say it's like ayahuasca, but it has this energy of like, especially
Absolutely.
especially at high doses where you're like,
Absolutely.
yeah, they have their own spirit, right? They're
Mhm.
connected to the world. Technologies are things like MDMA, ketamine, and LSD.
Okay, yep.
Highly advanced technologies where I've found the next day you don't feel as clean,
That's true.
as open.
Mhm.
You feel like you had a technology, like a highly advanced AI system blast through everything. You're kind of like, whoa, like, whoa, that was crazy. And you're like kind of scattered the next day. So because
Gotcha.
they're too far removed from nature. That's why I call them
Yeah.
technologies. And that's why this man I heard, he said, I call them advanced technologies versus spirit.
Okay.
I'm like,
Yeah,
the
I
plant
mean,
spirits.
yeah. I it is, the whole understanding of plant medicine, how it can work before, during, and after ceremony, was something a concept I really didn't pick up on until, I don't know, about a year ago. But I feel like when I sit with Wachuma, um, yes, there's the sense that for example, before ceremony, things that come up. And yeah, so for me, Wachuma is so powerful. And loving it and learning more about it and working with it and just very thankful for grandfather.
Mm, mm.
um, Let's see here. I want to make sure I know you have other things on your docket for today. But I wanted to make sure that the listeners have a way to check you out or connect with you online. Do you have any handles or websites you want to mention for yourself?
Yeah, so right now, the best way to connect with me would just be Instagram. That's where I post most of my stuff. It's just Ahren Lynch-Potter. It's AHRENLYNCHPOTTER. So you just find me on Instagram. You can follow me there. You can connect with me. You can talk to me there. And then on every major platform, it's the Mental Dietitian, and that is on Spotify, that's on YouTube, that's on Apple Podcasts, everything there. I'm almost finished a website, but that'll just you'll be able to get access to that through Instagram. It's not even done yet, but
Hmm,
that'd be the best way to connect with me, learn more about what I do, etc., etc. Yeah.
perfect. And do you have anything uh, coming up? Any exciting, I don't know, future ceremonies, journeys, travels?
Mm,
You just
no,
sat, you're fresh
I
out.
just
So
sat with one. And
yeah.
here's the thing, my last one a year ago was simultaneously the most profound experience, but also traumatizing at the same time.
Mm.
It's like my friend and I were talking about this about ayahuasca. Is ayahuasca is like riding a really powerful horse that is impossible to tame, and it'll just buck you off. You'll be on the ride of your life, and you'll get bucked off, and you'll be like, "Holy shit!" But you know you have to get back on the horse one day.
Mhm.
And for me, plant, I had no. It was such a big experience to integrate that I'm still integrating parts of it
Yeah.
where I almost was like, I'm done with plant medicine. I don't, I can't do that. Like, it was a lot. It shattered me on who I thought I was, and I didn't integrate it properly.
Mm.
Basically, what happened from a emotional standpoint is I'd lived a lot of my life in shame, and
Mm.
ayahuasca showed me the prison of my own perspective that I built and then dissolved it all.
Mm.
But because I was used to living in that prison cell, I went back to doing shame-based behavior because I wasn't used to that much freedom.
Okay.
6 months later, I had to relive the entire experience sober
Mm.
over about 5 to 7 days. That might sound strange to some people, but when you sit with something like ayahuasca, it is always with you. It doesn't It's hard to explain. Once you meet the spirit of some of these things, that you can recall the spirit into your life. And it's
Okay.
hard to a very Christian, Western, scientific lens for that to even sound like any kind of sense. But if
Mm.
you talk to any person who's First Nations or native to their land and has grown in that land for thousands of years, they were like, yeah, like we have connections to these plants. These
Mm.
plants communicate to us. And then you have somebody who's very Western be like, oh, they're just a bunch of primitive savages that don't know what they're talking about.
Mm. So what had
Yeah.
happened? So you're saying you had to relive that for 5 to 7
Yeah. So I had to relive an experience like hallucinating, going in and out of fight or flight sober for 5 days.
wow. What
Yeah.
was uh, how what I'm confused. The spirit
How
came
does that
back?
happen? It
Well, what were you doing when that came on?
I was smoking a lot of marijuana for about
Mm.
5 months after sitting with
Okay.
ayahuasca, and if you ever sit with ayahuasca, never mix those 2 ever. Don't even
Mm.
go anywhere near them. It's a bad idea, and you can do
Okay.
your own research around why.
Mm.
Um, After that experience, I went back to doing shame-based behavior because that's the water that I'd swum in. I used to live in a reality where every time I wanted to do something that I would second guess myself and I would just turn into this like analysis paralysis about
Mm.
everything. It'd be about my job, my relationship, everything in my life, constantly being like, is it the right decision? Is this what I'm supposed to do?
Mhm.
And I ended up smoking marijuana heavily. And when I say heavily, it's not like massive amounts of it. I'm just very sensitive to substances. So I maybe have a bit of a joint every day.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
literally, just, like, pull a puff, but I'd really feel it, and there was a lot of benefits from that. I liked the feeling of it, but when you especially marijuana, it is a very, it's a very powerful plant medicine, but it also is great at numbing things, amazing
Mm.
at it. But if you use it correctly, it can be very powerful, incredibly powerful. There's some people that work in the healing space, and they just use marijuana, and they help people have massive experiences. So
Mm.
basically, what happens sometimes to people when they stop smoking something, when they've been doing it a lot, cold turkey, is you can get psychosis, right? So I started basically having psychosis where I had voices in my head all day. I imagine what it'd be like being like schizophrenic. It
Mm.
was not fun at all,
Wow.
really not fun. And the voice, I basically had to spend time with the emotion of shame and see how it showed up in my body. It showed up in so many different ways. Me holding my stomach all the time because I didn't want to look fat. It shows up in your sexuality and how you express yourself in that area. It shows every place, what I wanted to do with my life, what direction I wanted to go, how much money I wanted to make, all of that. It was like a
Mm.
governor. I It's like I had a garden, but I wasn't looking at what plants were in the garden, and shame was a vine that had covered everything,
Wow.
and ayahuasca showed me that there was a giant vine in there when I would just kept on looking at the walls through the
Mm.
vines. And then I just let the vines grow back for over 6 months, and then I had to look at them again. And
Okay, I see.
I basically relived the experience that ayahuasca showed me over 5 days, but much
Okay.
slower this time. Instead of being over 4 hours, it was over 5 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, um, well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I guess lesson learned there is, well, integration. I
Integrate.
mean, yeah, yeah.
I was an integration coach.
Wow.
I
So,
was a integration coach, and it just goes to show it's not about what you know, it's about what you do.
yes, I hear so many people in this space constantly saying, I know nothing, as they keep entering more ceremonies and doing more trainings. I think it's the plant medicine that sets you straight sometimes. When you think you're the the top of the mountain, you know everything, you've had so many experiences, and then you get knocked back down, in a good way.
Yeah,
But
in a
everyone,
good
yeah.
way, and there's some
eh,
people.
But
So,
yeah,
yeah.
in a way, you can, or you were referring to people who say, I've been on my healing journey for 10 years. For me, my healing journey is never ending, but I see it's different. I mean, just having that awareness around healing and feeling versus taking the medicines and hoping and wishing that this is the one or this is the time. So it's yes, let's see here. I think we've covered, or I know we've kind of jumped out around all over the place, but I've really appreciated just your experiences and your knowledge. So thank you for your time. It's been fun.
Thank you, Maggie. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Yes, and we will be sure to stay in touch.
Absolutely.
I will give a shout out to your podcast and Instagram accounts within the episode details so listeners can
Sure.
find you there. And I'd love to have you back. So let's please keep in touch. Thank you so much. I hope you have a lovely weekend. Happy Friday today.
You too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for joining the journey. You can tune in to Minds on Mushrooms on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts.